Hey everyone, you're watching KTAL News Now. I'm your host Anthony Mocklin, and today is Friday. We made it to the end of the week, and the weekend is pretty much here. But today is Football Friday, where we'll be talking about the NFL game last night, as well as looking ahead to some high school football and college games this weekend. And first up, they had a few high school games with high school football last night on Thursday. And one of those was the Evangel Eagles at Neville. And Evangel is coming off of a win against West Monroe last week. Their team went 6-6 last season, and they were looking to get off to a good start. They have junior quarterback Pop Houston, who is a 4-star recruit, and the number 14 quarterback in the United States at the helm again this season. His sophomore year, he threw for almost 4,500 yards and 38 touchdowns with only 6 interceptions, while adding almost 700 yards on the ground and 7 touchdowns. So he is coming off an amazing campaign, and he is back for his junior season. And Chris Burns has highlights from that game and the outcome.
Pop Houston and the Eagles on the road taking on the Neville Tigers. Although he can spin it, we're going to check out these legs. On 4th and 9, Houston calls his own number, picks up the first down. They started out methodically. To carry Drake, gets the handoff, takes off for the first down and then some. Big pickup from the big man. Eagles near the goal line. Ashton Dawson, fullback, you can take it in. Tutty. Right now it's the Eagles with the lead in the fourth quarter.
And unfortunately, Evangel would fall 33-32, losing by just 1 point. And their next game will be a home affair against Natchitoches Central with the Chiefs. And looking ahead to Huntington, where the Huntington Raiders went to West Monroe, and they finished last season 6-6 as well, and they ended up dropping the first game and would lose this game as well to start 0-2, unfortunately. And Chris Burns has more on the highlights from that.
First year West Monroe head coach DeMichael Deiser, and the Rebels up big at half. Raiders go to the ground. Mason Willis shuts it down with a big tackle. Willis was flying all over the place. Here he comes again with another tackle to help the Raiders force a punt. Rebels go on offense. It's Christian Ponte, and check out this strong run here for 12 yards and the first down. This man would kept getting his number called. It's Ponte again, patient, then finding a hole. Then check out him dragging defenders for 27 yards and the first down. He would eventually score a touchdown. West Monroe has a large lead in this game right now.
And West Monroe did hang on to win 42-18, and Huntington's next matchup will be heading to Captain Shreve to take on the Gators next week. But over in Texas, Dangerfield visited Tatum High School to play them, and the Tatum Eagles ended up dropping their season opener against Winsboro, but they ended up getting the job done against Dangerfield this week, and Chris Burns has more and all the highlights.
And Tatum hosting Dangerfield. First quarter, Eagles up 6-3. Grant Adcock, quarterback keeper, finds his way into the end zone, plus the 2-point conversion. Eagles up 14-3. Next drive, Isaiah Parker connects with Jakiran Craver, who shakes off a defender, slides into the end zone after their PAT. It's 14-10. Bad snap on the punt gives Tatum great field position, and Ty Moore muscles his way into the end zone. Tatum with a 20-10 lead at half. Dangerfield trying to stay into the game, but it was a large lead for the Eagles when we left this one.
And Tatum would also hang on to win that game 41-30. They will host the Newton Eagles next week in that week's matchup. And looking over to the NFL, Thursday Night Football kicked off the NFL season last night with the Dallas Cowboys facing the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Eagles ended up winning 24-21 in what was pretty much a tale of two halves. When you look at, there was a lightning delay that stopped most of the game, But in the first half, there were 41 combined points from both teams compared to just 3 points in the second half. And in that first half, where it was super high scoring, there were no punts from either team in the first half. Every single possession resulted in a score, mostly touchdowns, but it was a back and forth all the way in the first half, with running back Javonte Williams for the Dallas Cowboys scoring 2 touchdowns, and Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts also adding 2 touchdowns of his own, so they had 4 touchdowns between the two players. And I saw a crazy stat regarding Jalen Hurts with, if you know the Eagles and you watch their games, you know that they have the tush push or brotherly shove, where they pretty much push Jalen Hurts up the middle for a yard or 2, usually in 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 or at the goal line in those situations just to gain that 1 yard. And he ended up getting 14 rushing touchdowns from those 1-yard touchdowns last season. None of his 14 rushing touchdowns were from scrambles, but both of his rushing touchdowns last night were on scrambles. So I thought that was a really crazy and interesting stat where, of course, he had no scramble touchdowns last year, and then both of his happened to be on scrambles. If you told that to somebody, if you said that Jalen Hurts had 2 rushing touchdowns last night, they would have immediately thought it would have been from the tush push and just a 1-yard rushing score, just shoving him in there. But he ended up taking off when he didn't see what he liked downfield, and he just ran it in himself. But then after those 4 touchdowns, Dallas ended up kicking a field goal, and then the Eagles followed up with another touchdown from running back Saquon Barkley on a 10-yard score to make it 21-17. And then Dallas did a 2-minute drill and ended up hitting a field goal to end the half to make it 21-20. And then to start the second half, Philly ended up kicking a field goal to extend their lead, and then little did we know that would be the only score of the second half, because Dallas had the ball in the red zone. They were marching at the gates and knocking on the door of a score, and they ended up fumbling the ball before a lightning delay caused an hour-plus delay of the game, which didn't resume until like 10:30 last night. And after that, it was pretty much a slogfest. Like, there was, between both teams, there were 5 straight punts, and at the end of the game, Dallas ended up turning it over on downs. So it was really just they just couldn't do what they were doing in the first half. That magic, I guess, dissipated after the lightning delay. But one notable player in the game for Dallas was wide receiver CeeDee Lamb, who ended up coming down with 7 catches for 110 yards. And he could have had probably a lot more if he did not have 3 drops throughout the game, especially on the last play on 4th down for Dallas. And those 3 drops all of them were right in his hands. The last one he did have to kind of dive for, but it was still like right in his hands. I love CD to death. I'm a huge CD supporter, especially in fantasy football. But you got to come down with those. There's just no excuse for that. And he knows that. He ended up taking full accountability for that after the game. So that really hurt Dallas. I thought they were in it the entire time. Dak, his stats in the box score really don't do him justice, because he really was slinging the ball down the field. And he ended up completing 21 of 34 passes for 188 yards, while Eagles quarterback Jalen Hurts completed 19 of 23 passes for 152 yards, but he added 62 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns. So as far as passing numbers, neither quarterback really looked great if you're just looking at the box score. But if you are looking at average depth of target or ADOT, Dak looked way better in my opinion. And like I said, his receivers unfortunately did not do him justice. He could have had a much better game statistically, but he did all he could, I thought. He placed the ball where his receivers needed to be, but unfortunately some of them just couldn't come down with it. But Saquon Barkley rushed 18 times for 60 yards and a touchdown, and outside of that touchdown, he really didn't have a great game either. I believe that averages out to 3.3 yards per carry. So really not the best season that you want to see from Saquon if you're an Eagles fan. Also, the receiving game, like I was saying earlier, with Jalen Hurts only passing for 152 yards, your star receivers in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, they really had such a quiet day, particularly A.J. Brown, who is viewed by many people as a top 10 receiver in the league in terms of talent. He only had one catch last night and didn't even get a target until very late in the game on I believe it was an 8-yard catch, and that was his only catch and stats that he recorded in the game. He was out there pretty much doing cardio, and I can't imagine that was very fun for him. I'm if we saw anything from last year where he was like reading books on the sideline and everything, I'm assuming he's gonna bring this up again or get really frustrated with that, which I would be too. I mean, that's your top receiver. You might as well use him, but I don't even know why they didn't even target him, because he is an elite talent, and he is, in my opinion, being wasted. I know they won the Super Bowl and everything, but you got to get the ball to your guys and let them work, to your playmakers. So that was just a very, very big head scratcher for me with that, but they ended up hanging on to win 24-21. So I guess it worked out in the end. I'm sure they'll address that with the coaches and everything like that. But looking ahead to college football this weekend, we have a big local Louisiana matchup this weekend with LSU and Louisiana Tech, and that game is being played in Baton Rouge, but Louisiana Tech is not – Ruston is not very far from our station here in Shreveport, and so it's a homegrown matchup. And if you have been paying attention from last week with LSU, they were previously ranked number 9, and they went into Clemson, who was ranked number 4 at the time, and beat them 17-10. And that was the first time that LSU has started a season 1-0 since the 2019 championship team with Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, all of them. So it has been a long time coming since they started a season 1-0. And with that win, LSU jumped up in the top 25 poll, up to number 3 in the rankings. So that's a huge accomplishment for them, and just gaining notoriety as, we are one of the best teams in the country. And they definitely showed it against Clemson, where quarterback Garrett Nussmeier threw for 230 yards and a touchdown, and then running back Caden Durham ran for 75 yards and a score. And Louisiana Tech is also coming off of a win against Southeastern in Louisiana, and they won that game 24-0. Trey Kukuk had 130 yards passing with a touchdown, and he also ran for 48 yards rushing. So that's something that LSU will probably want to contain come Saturday. And linebacker Colby Fields for Louisiana Tech is a transfer from LSU. He sat out in 2023 during his transfer period, but he played last year at Louisiana Tech and finished his campaign with 71 tackles, and he already has 13 tackles after their win against Southeastern and a sack. Like I said, he's a transfer from LSU, and he's also from Rummel High School in Metairie or New Orleans, Louisiana. So he's going to have a lot of stake in that game. It's a very local, homegrown player. He's going to have a lot riding on that game, especially considering he transferred from LSU. So he's going to want to get his, from them. LSU is a very, very large favorite as a 36.5-point favorite. And if I'm looking at that and you're an LSU fan and you're like, oh, it's an easy win, you just never know. They just got to come in there and take care of business and do what they're supposed to do, because there have been some crazy upsets in the last few years. Most recently last year, where unranked Northern Illinois went into number 5 Notre Dame and beat them as 28-point underdogs on a game-winning field goal last year. So, like I said, anything can happen. They just need to go in there and take care of business. My freshman year at LSU, we ended up hosting Troy in 2017, and we were 3 touchdown favorites in that game, and they came in there and beat us. So that was, I will never forget that for as long as I live. That is the worst loss I've ever watched in person in any sport. I just the energy in Tiger Stadium after that game, you could have heard a pin drop. It was ridiculous in a stadium that's so regarded as one of the toughest places to play, just because of the atmosphere and just how loud it gets. So you can imagine just how disappointed and disheartening that loss was. So, but 2 years later, undefeated national champions. So, I mean, I guess we'll trade that for that, but I'll do that any day. But that is, like I said, anything can happen in that game. Like I said, they just need to go in there. Do not underestimate them just because they're such a huge favorite. It's a local game. Sure, you have people that you played high school ball with. Players on each side that know each other and grew up together. But at the end of the day, just leave it out on the football field and just do what you need to do. Because if they lose or end up winning by just a little bit, I mean, they're going to be plummeting in the top 25 rankings. So you really want to keep that top spot, especially come playoffs, to have a good seed and just have an easier path to hopefully a national championship. So we'll see if they can get it done. I'm sure they will, but you never know. Like I said, there's crazier things have happened. But looking over to the Big Ten, Big Ten and SEC, number 15 Michigan is playing number 18 Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, along with Texas, recently joined the SEC. So it's no longer a Big Ten, Big 12 matchup that it used to be. And with Oklahoma, they are coming off a pretty decent win against Illinois State, where they won 35-3. Their quarterback, John Mateer, threw for almost 400 yards and 3 touchdowns with an interception. And he also added 24 rushing yards and a score. Wide receiver Keontez Lewis also caught 9 passes for 119 yards and 2 touchdowns. So they were really getting things going through the air. They had a lot of things working for them. And Michigan is coming off a not as impressive win against New Mexico. They won 34-17, where true freshman quarterback Bryce Underwood, who was initially committed to LSU, ended up flipping his commitment to Michigan. So don't hate me if I am not the biggest fan of him because of that. But he ended up passing for 250 yards and a touchdown, while running back Justice Haynes rushed 16 times for 159 yards and 3 touchdowns. And wide receiver Marlon Klein caught 6 passes for 93 yards and a touchdown. So they really had a pretty balanced approach, and it ended up working for them pretty well. But like I said, New Mexico doesn't really move me if we're looking at people who they're playing. I mean, same with Oklahoma's opponent. I'm not really impressed with either of those. I mean, it comes time to where whenever they face it, it'll see who really is the top dog based on them. It's time to put your money where your mouth is, pretty much. And one thing that was interesting to me with these two programs is that Michigan is the number 1 team. Like, they're ranked first all time in wins, while Oklahoma is ranked 5th in college football history. They're number 1 and number 5, respectively, in program wins in college football history. But these two schools have only played one time, and the last time that was in the 1976 Orange Bowl, where Oklahoma did win 14-6 and claimed their 5th of 7 national championships. But that was the first time that a Big Ten school was allowed to compete in a bowl outside of the Rose Bowl. And like I said, it ended up resulting in a national championship for Oklahoma. But that was way back when. We're talking almost 50 years ago, which is crazy to even imagine. But like I said, they only played one time, so this is their second ever matchup, so it should be a good one. Both of these teams had down seasons last year, but they are looking to improve. They have great defenses this year, which Oklahoma in recent years has really not had a great defense in a very long time. So it'll be interesting to see this kind of rubber match between the two of them. One thing that concerns me about Michigan is particularly Bryce Underwood, who against New Mexico was pressured 7 times and took 2 sacks, while only completing 2 passes. So I don't think that Oklahoma is going to pressure just 7 times. I think they'll pressure a lot more than that. So it'll be interesting to see how he does under that pressure and if that translates to success for their offense, which outside of him was very good on the ground as well. So if they can't get anything going through the air, they can lean on that run game. But, Oklahoma has a pretty mean, fierce pass rush this year. They ranked 13th in sack rate last year, and that group is primarily led by R. Mason Thomas, who is a senior this year, and he is looking to get some pressure on Michigan. And we'll see if that happens. Oklahoma is currently a 5.5-point favorite as of 30 minutes ago when I checked, but we'll see. I like Oklahoma in this game, so we'll see what they can do. I think they're the better team, and hopefully that shows on Saturday. And another interesting matchup this week, there's not a lot of super high caliber matchups this week, whereas week 1 we had 3 top 10 matchups. That is not the case this week. That the Michigan-Oklahoma game is the premier matchup that you want to see, but also one that with a lot of college football playoff implications is Iowa at number 16, Iowa State. And if you've been following Iowa State, they actually competed in week 0 against Kansas State in Ireland, where they won that game 24-21. They were ranked number 22 at the time, whereas Kansas State was number 17. Kansas State has fallen outside of the top 25, but it was still a very impressive win for the Cyclones. In week 1, which is technically their second game, they ended up beating South Dakota 55-7, which, whatever. They came in and did what they were expected to do. Didn't really take too much out of that game. Their quarterback, Rocco Becht, completed 19 of 20 passes, so almost perfect, for 278 yards and 3 touchdowns. So they had things clicking on their offense, and especially in week 0 as well. So they have a lot of momentum going for them. Like I said, they're number 16 now, so we'll see what they can do if they can prove that they belong. And their defense has really helped them to be where they are today, as well as their offense. Particularly their run defense, and they've been forcing a ton of turnovers in the first 2 games. So they're doing what Iowa is normally known for in the last few years, because if you were a college football fan in the last few years and you followed Iowa, they were pretty much non-existent on offense. It's almost like they didn't know what a forward pass was, and they relied heavily on their defense to keep them in games and force turnovers and honestly get them points, because their offense was absolutely abysmal in the last few years, and they were just riding that defense all the way. But we'll see what they can do this year. Their quarterback is really, he's making his first collegiate debut in this season, and he really doesn't have, like he said, he had a lot of nervousness in his first game against Albany, where they won 34-7, and he really didn't have to do a whole lot, where they, as a team, Iowa ran for 238 rushing yards, so they did pretty much everything on the ground. And their quarterback, Mark Gronowski, was only asked to do the bare minimum. He only completed 8 of 15 passes for 44 yards and a touchdown. So really mind-boggling numbers for a quarterback, where the norm you usually see is around 150 to 200 yards. The great games will be 300 yards. So really odd to see only 44 passing yards in this. But he also added 47 non-sack rushing yards and a touchdown. So if you don't include the sacks that he took, he ended up having more rushing yards than passing yards. So really, really confusing. But, we'll see if they can continue, if they can contain the run. Because, like I said, Iowa State has been stellar against the run. So if they force him to pass and drop back and pass, I'm not sure if he'll be able to handle all that. We really don't know what he can do under pressure like that, and just having to, if they are playing from behind and they're forced into passing and playing catch up, we really don't know what that looks like for Iowa. So we'll see. Iowa State is currently a 3.5-point favorite, so it should be a pretty close game all in all. I think that Iowa State comes out of here with the victory, but if they don't, they're in a very tough spot in terms of playoff implications. The only way I can see them being redeemed from this and being in the playoffs is with a Big 12 title in the conference championship. But if they win this, they won't have to worry too much about that because they'll probably go up again. Because like I said, this is going to be a very closely contested game, and if they can come out of here with a win, I think the rankings will show that next week, and they should be arguably in the top 12 if they come out of here with a win. So hopefully that is the case. Like I said, I'm backing Iowa State here. Go Cyclones. I think they come out of here with a win. Not easily, but I think their defense is what ultimately gets them there. But that's all I have today for Football Friday. You can watch all of those games this weekend. It's going to be a great slate of games. And you can watch KTAL News Now every day, Monday through Friday at 1 p.m. You can find all of our previous editions of KTAL News Now on our YouTube page at KTAL News. But like I said, go to KTALnews.com. That's where you can get all of your local breaking and top stories. You can get more sports news, high school sports, everything you can think of on our website at KTALnews.com, which is where we stream every day, Monday through Friday, on weekdays at 1 p.m. I'm Anthony Mocklin. Have a great rest of your day and weekend, and thank you for joining us.